Here's Brody Brazil.
Okay, I'm going to try and make this video to summarize what exactly is going on right now with the A's, with the state of Nevada, with the special session. I mean, it's in recess for the weekend. They're finally getting a couple days off, right? This legislative session began in February. It was supposed to wrap up for good on Monday at midnight. The governor called not one, but two special sessions. They knocked the first one out on Tuesday within a couple hours, or what seemed to be a couple hours. But then on Wednesday, the 35th special session in Nevada got underway. It started, it stopped. Now they're in recess. I'll try and explain all of this. Again, it's very complicated. There's so many moving parts. But to really understand this, let's go back to the beginning of how this language was even introduced and was proposed. It was initially called SB 509, as in Senate Bill 509. This is how the A's were going to ask for approximately $380 million of public money to finance their $1.5 billion ballpark at the Tropicana site, or maybe elsewhere, but somewhere in the resort corridor of Las Vegas. Now, this language, I mean, first off, let's step back even further than that. The whole idea of this evolved so late in the session. Representatives of the A's had mentioned on Wednesday, in fact, that their conversations, their movement forward in Las Vegas for a site like this, it began in February. But nothing was presented in February or March or April. I mean, the A's announced on April 19th they had purchased the other site, the first site. Then a couple of weeks later, they pivoted to the current site, the Tropicana site, but none of the language in this request was not even submitted until literally the final day it possibly could have been. I think that was May 25th or 26th. It was the final day for the legislature to actually accept incoming bills, incoming proposals like they did. So they accepted it on a Friday, which happened to be a holiday weekend. And on Monday, Memorial Day, starting at 4 p.m. for 6.5 hours, they had the initial hearing. I should say the one and only hearing on SB 509. And so there were a lot of questions asked. There was a presentation made, which was, by the way, identical to the one that was made for SB1 in the special session. I mean, literally the PowerPoint slides I don't think there were any changes. But the whole idea of this late-breaking proposition, at one point you would think and figure, well, it favors the A's. They're presenting something. It's last minute. They've said that if it's not accepted, they'll turn their direction somewhere else, seek another opportunity, maybe in a different city. I mean, that was exactly stated back on Memorial Day. So it has seemed, though, that the leverage the A's might have had in their urgency, in their nature to try and get things done really quick, get to a vote, have the vote, don't have a lot of conversation, like, here's how it is. It seems like a lot of that has been reversed because it never got brought up in the regular session. In fact, SB 509 never actually even made it out of the Finance Committee, and they never took a vote on it. So a lot of people thought, well, that's it. It's done. The legislative session ended at midnight. It never got heard. And it was even reported on Tuesday that it would not get brought up in a special session. Special session can be brought up by members of the legislature. It can also be brought up by the governor. In this case, that's exactly what Joe Lombardo did. He had two things to bring up in special sessions. One of them was the fourth out of 5 Senate bills that didn't get resolved as part of the state budget. I think this one was worth $1 billion, 1 point something billion. The one prior that did actually go through, the fourth out of 5, it went through only in the 11th hour, literally, on the final day. That one was worth $7.5 billion of the state's overall budget, right? And you can't tackle this stuff until you pass the state's budget. So the governor calls the special session first to close out the 5th and final bill for the state budget. And then he brings up another special session to tackle SB1, which is the A's public request. Now, you have to understand about this special session. This is after 120 days since February. And, forget the last couple months. I mean, that has been a grind. This is how Nevada works. They have legislative sessions every other year, so they try and cram a lot of stuff into 120 days every other year. And a lot of lawmakers right now are saying, hey, maybe we should even revisit this whole idea. This is not enough time. We don't like special sessions. And especially, though, after the last couple days and weeks, they have been grinding. They have been burning both ends of the candle. I'm talking about the Senate and the Assembly and all of the staff associated with Nevada legislature. I mean, look, I can appreciate it. I'm not a politics person. I'm a sports broadcaster. Let's just say, like, they've been having games. They've been having double headers for 3 weeks straight. If that's our analogy here, then that's our analogy here. That's the grind that they've been on. So then imagine all of that work to try and reach the conclusion they didn't bring up SB 509, either on purpose or they ran out of time or nobody was motivated to move on it. Like I said, it never even got out of the Finance Committee. It has to pass the committee to ultimately be heard by the Senate and then heard by the Assembly to take respective votes on it. But forced into the special session, right, by the governor, he brought this up. He brought up two things. But when presented back on Wednesday, and I mean, it did not exactly go over extremely well on Memorial Day. I mean, some things were perfectly fine for some lawmakers, but there were some questions, there were some things pointed at with the SB 509 presentation. However, the language and the presentation and the actual Senate bill 509 and SB1 are identical. The 44 pages are exactly the same. Essentially, lawmakers were a bit frustrated. They pointed out things that could be different. No changes were made. And this identical bill was presented to them, approximately 10 days later. So all of this, right now, again, let's just go to the human aspect of it. You just put in all this work to get to the end of the regular session. You thought you were done. Then you're not done. You handle one important piece of business, which is the state budget. That needs to happen. And then this is kind of thrown at you the next day. And this, by the way, is the reason that they decided to take a 3-day weekend. They needed this. And we'll talk about both sides and the amendments now. I think there's reasonings for the break for both sides. But this, I mean, as was stated by some reporters who cover this on a regular basis, look, these people need to see their families. They thought they were going to be done. Now they're called back into action. This is more of the human side and the frustration of it all, let alone the actual negotiation part of it. Okay, SB1 being brought up like this. How did we get to a special session? Why did this not just end? Kind of like the Nevada film tax credit, right? There was supposed to be an expanded film tax credit and the ability for a couple different movie studios to have new headquarters in Clark County. That bill just died. They didn't hear it. It passed the end of the regular session. Why did that one die, and why is SB1 being brought back up again? That's a question a lot of people have. Is it related to something else? Is this in tandem with the final state budget item, AB1, which was presented and passed on Tuesday? And I'm still not sure. Like, that was one that the governor had already vetoed. They approved it. The Senate and the Assembly approved it. He vetoed it, he sent it back to them, and then they sent it right back to him again in this special session. He's yet to sign it as far as I know as I record this right now. So were these things supposed to be in tandem? Was this, hey, I'll sign AB1 if you guys pass SB1? Is it that? I don't know. Is it possible that SB1 is being heard to the fullest extent as a show to Major League Baseball to say that, hey, we are serious about landing a major league team here, whether it's the A's or whether it's eventually expansion? We are interested, and we're not just going to cut it off and say, well, that's as far as we're going to take it. Is that a reason why this went into special session? I mean, there's a lot of things that could have gone into a special session. There's a handful of things that didn't even get brought up, and they just died. Why did this live on? And obviously, I think the last part of it, no matter what you deduce from why this is here, like, the governor has a very, very clear interest in the project, right? We talk about who has championed this. Well, obviously, the A's have championed relocation. Certain politicians have championed it. The governor has championed it. Outside of that, there's not a group in Las Vegas that's clamoring for baseball. A couple individuals here and there. I saw an editorial written by the Las Vegas Review-Journal that was quite interesting. But I mean, it's clear that the governor has an interest in making this project happen. So how do I read it right now? We're talking about just the Senate. Again, the Assembly has to take their own vote after the Senate. If the Senate passes, right, 21 members of the Senate, so you need 11 yeses, right? But to me, the way I look at it, it's pretty 50-50 right now. Looking at body language, looking at comments and questions, I think that's the best way to describe the Senate outlook right now. And this is tight. This is not decisive one way or the other. I think it kind of does follow some party lines. Remember, Republican governor, Democratic-led Senate and Assembly. But that doesn't always follow those lines because there are people here who are more pro-business, pro-spending, pro-growth, pro-risk. And that doesn't always translate across party lines in Nevada politics, again, from what I'm gathering and presenting here. But I do think in the Senate right now, it is kind of 50-50. If I'm guessing, if there's 21 total members here and you need 11 yeses, I do feel like right now there might be 8 people in favor of SB 509. There might be. There definitely might be 8 in opposition. So there's 16. And there might be 5 people on the fence. Get you to 21. Is that the right math, Brazil? Yes, it is. 8, 8, and 5. If I'm guessing right now, I think that's a safe guess. There's opposition on clear fronts. Clear opposition on several fronts. Can't even read what I wrote there. But I would also say that, there's a few that we just haven't really heard from. We've seen questions asked. We've seen some ask no questions yet. Hard to know where they stand on this. And even again, with questions, sometimes tough questions turn out to be, okay, that's my showing. That's my tough questioning. I'll still vote yes for this. Even though I questioned it tough, maybe the questions got answered. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. I'm not predicting either way for the Senate. I'm just saying it does seem very 50-50 with some clear undecideds so far. So right now we're in the state of amendments. SB1 came back unaltered from SB 509. Amendments have been requested. Nicole Cannizzaro, in fact, was at the end of Wednesday night, losing my mind, said, hey, I'm expecting we're going to see some amendments on Thursday. And apparently reportedly there were amendments, but apparently the amendments did not change the minds. They did not earn the necessary votes that this thing would move forward. And so you can see why, we were expected to have lawmakers on the floor at 11:30 on Thursday. And 11:30 passed, 12:30, 1:30, 2:33. Was it 4:30 or 5 o'clock? They finally came out and said, you know what? We're going to recess for the weekend. We're not only going to recess for today, we're taking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. And again, in reverse, this is both the Senate and the Assembly on recess. But in reverse, they're burnt out, right? So most likely, the reason for this extended recess is the amendments right now. Both sides probably looked at each other and said, we probably need to step back and reassess things. The lawmakers need a little bit more time to clear their head, to get a break from all of this. And on the A's side, obviously their first round of amendments that they made, whatever concessions were, and we'll talk about, I think, later on this presentation here, what are the things that are up for, change and what requests have been made to change. But it seems like maybe both sides looked at each other and said, we need some more time on this. And maybe the A's are going back, I don't want to say to square one, but maybe they're reconsidering a lot of things in SB1 that need amendments, some more things they can offer. I know the community benefits area was highly questioned the other day. But ultimately, how will time see this pause and this reset? And I was thinking about an analogy on this the other day, and longtime A's fans will directly understand this. And I hate to bring it up because it was tragedy for a lot of us, but remember the 1989 World Series, A's-Giants, right? Oakland wins the first 2 games. Minutes before Game 3 was supposed to begin at Candlestick Park, 5:04 p.m., Loma Prieta earthquake, and the series is paused for 14 days? It was a decent amount of time. It's funny, I should know that off the top of my head, but it was the World Series was paused. Baseball series don't pause like that for a long time. And everybody said, well, what would the effect be when the series ultimately resumed and the Bay Area took care of itself and recovered from the earthquake? Again, it's a weird analogy to bring back into this situation, but it is kind of like this right now. A couple days off, the A's with some opportunity to make changes, lawmakers with the chance to clear their head. How will this see the pause and the reset? And will things change that much? Will opinions change? Will the presentation change? Will the deal change? It's possible. It's possible some opinions get solidified, or there's more time and opportunity for, lawmakers to gauge the public opinion, which I think we'll talk about later too. The public opinion on SB 509 and SB1 have not been fantastic. So we'll find out. I don't want to imply anything, but the pause will have some sort of effect, I would think. And so what issues are up for discussion here? Like, why did the Senate ask for, some revisions and some amendments? And a lot of it had to do with projections versus promises, right? The attendance numbers. A couple of the senators asked about, well, wait a second, if you're promising 27,000 every baseball game and you can only seat 30,000, what happens on the nights where you only get 14,000? How do you make up that gap? Tax revenues, there's a live entertainment tax to be collected, but also one not to be given by the A's in terms of, having a live entertainment tax on their 9-acre site. And by the way, that's the Raiders and the Golden Knights are also exempt from that, to be clear, but every other business in town is not. There were some questions about actual jobs, construction jobs, stadium jobs, the wage of these jobs, what was estimated, the wage of current jobs at the Tropicana Hotel versus what wages would exist in a brand new stadium opportunity. There were a lot of questions. And again, the overall theme, though, is these projections. Are these accurate or are they aspirational? I can't judge all of the fine-tuning of payrolls and taxes. That's not my thing, but I will tell you, and I've made quite a few videos on this, the site needs attendance. It needs paid attendance to pay off general obligation bonds in Clark County. And the one thing I do know about sports attendance, there will be a honeymoon period. Jeremy Aguero is right when he presents that the first couple years here could be a huge economic boost. But it's not about that and the shiny new toy. It's about year 5. It's about year 6 and 9 and 12 and 15. I mean, this is a 30-year arrangement. And if you've ever watched sports, like I have for basically 40 years now, you know how the tides work. High tide, low tide, good seasons, really bad seasons. To project and expect that level of attendance and commitment, I mean, first off, you have to consistently put out a product, to field a product that's competitive. And even then at that point, how many times have we seen in sports, we thought a team was going to be really, really good out of training camp, out of spring training, whatever. And then, preseason, season rolls around, this team is not good. Nobody's showing up by August anymore when they're 20 under 500. Or in this case, when the 2023 A's are on pace to lose 130 games. So I'm just saying from the sports perspective, projections versus promises, that's like saying, well, we promise to win 97 games every single year. Not going to happen. Another issue that was up for discussion and potential amendments is more from the community benefits package. Not only maybe more from it, but at least identifying in writing, here's exactly what we do. Here's exactly what you can expect from this. Because that was honestly not clear. I have some videos on it. I have the whole session up, by the way, if you haven't seen what was presented on Wednesday. But it speaks in a lot of generalities, and I also understand that they're not at the level of detail yet that anybody would want or need. Like that, they're trying to be general because they don't have the specifics nailed down. They'd hate to promise something that honestly couldn't happen or they don't know. But they're trying to paint a picture. Instead, the Senate says here, well, we would actually like some detail, not an abstract painting. We'd like some detail in this painting. And then another thing that came up is naming rights. Now, you think about a stadium across the country, any stadium, they're all named. Most of them have a company's name on it. And the revenue from that can be $1 million, $2 million, couple million a year usually. And these deals are for, 10, 15 years at a time. So let's just say a new Las Vegas ballpark could be worth $3 million a year in naming rights. Times that by 30, well, there's $90 million. And let's up it over time for inflation. Let's say $115 million, hypothetically. Naming rights could be $115 million. It was publicly stated that naming rights would only go to the A's in this project, which is interesting. It's land that they didn't pay for. It's a stadium that's being, publicly funded to a large degree, and that they wouldn't kick back any of the naming rights. Now, is that uncommon in professional sports? I'd have to go case by case. I don't know how it always works. It's not uncommon that a team takes all of it, but in this case, when you're asking for so much, but you want to entirely benefit from that part of it, it's a question by lawmakers. I understand why they're asking that question. And in all fairness, if there's a stadium at Howard Terminal, it's going to get named. And you know what? The rights in that case probably go to the A's too. But in this situation where there's public money, there's public contribution to it, direct public contribution. At Howard Terminal, it would be state and federal contribution. But in the local contribution here, that's definitely an interesting topic, the naming rights to be brought up. So at this point, we've been talking about, the Senate's involvement, right? They're discussing this. They're going to take a vote on this, potentially and eventually. And it was believed, it was even reported that a vote could have happened Thursday. Turns out that obviously didn't happen. But ultimately, when they reconvene on Monday, we still don't know if a vote, I guess it largely depends on a work session, what's presented, what are the amendments. But all of this still has to go through the assembly as well, too. They get the opportunity to ask questions, too. I don't know if we'll have the whole presentation again, if that's necessary, or if they'll just get right to questions. But hypothetically, we talked about the 21-member Senate. So the assembly votes after this. There's 42 members of the assembly. Think about just, the even more amount of people, more diverse viewpoints, the questions that they would have after this. To think that this all gets wrapped up on Monday. Maybe by the Senate, maybe. But it's going to take a few days after that, I would imagine, for the assembly to have due diligence on this. And that runs us through June 12th, June 13th, and so on with the assembly. It's hypothetical that this could be going on to the end of next week, too. It's not, I don't think that would surprise anybody. It's possible. It's a possibility. The assembly, if we're looking at the party lines, they even lean more Democratic in the breakdown, the members 42 versus 21. They lean more Democratic than Republican than the Senate does. And again, I don't want to go too much on the party line thing, but I do think that it is a little bit of a factor. There are politics at play here. And that's the last point here. Lawmakers are still, and I use the word ripe, like they're frustrated because they all had proposals and bills and things that they worked on, both in the Senate and the Assembly. They wanted certain legislation passed that they were motivated by, like this was their baby. And some of these things either got denied or passed up, and the state said they didn't have enough money to do it. And so now they find themselves in a spot where it's like, wait, I work here and I wanted this and I pitched this and you didn't have the time of day for this, but wait a second, SB1 rolls right in and we have time for that. I'm literally rephrasing how some members of Senate put it. Now, we'll see if the Assembly feels the same way, but it makes you wonder that if the Senate is first, like, are they going to actually hit this the hardest, or will the Assembly hit it even much harder? And also think about all the things that the Senate is bringing up, kind of, clouding the air with a little bit of dust on this. Is the Assembly going to see that and say, well, we're only going to ask more questions because of the questions that were initially asked? So it makes you wonder if the assembly is going to hit harder. And again, more time to consider this equals probably more consideration of public opinion, which is still heavily against. The SB 509 and SB1 pages on the state of Nevada legislature website, they show a public opinion portion. And you have to register your name and your address in Nevada. So is it 1,000% accurate? Could it be weighted one way or the other, slanted one way or the other based on who's submitting what and who gets behind it? Of course. But I mean, the commonality is this has happened twice now, and typically 70 or so % oppose it. In fact, the highest I'd ever seen as of this morning was about, and I take it back, it was on the SB 509 page, not SB1. The highest I'd ever seen it when checking it was about 26%. That's the highest in favor that I've seen. So very one-sided, if that is a gauge of public opinion. And again, I go back to the fact that there's no real champion of the concept or of the project or of the idea of the A's relocating to Las Vegas. Like, the A's are championing this. The governor is championing this. Some politicians who have been lobbied are championing this. And you've heard that resorts have had their say in testimony that they support economic activity. Of course they do. But who is actively pushing this and saying this is how it happens, this is the way it needs to happen? I think most people are saying, yeah, of course we like the idea of this, but they don't actually have all the details. So I keep mentioning that because it's weird to me. A place like Portland has a group that's championing baseball to come there, or Salt Lake City, or Orlando, or Montreal. And here's Las Vegas, which is not really requesting this. This is more being asked of them than requested by them. And I say that from the Las Vegas perspective, maybe the state of Nevada perspective. I'm not sure if this is the last one here. How long have we gone here? Yeah, a while, like a full show. This is a full show. But looking at, and this is amazing that the play on this is totally going against maybe how it was intended. And that the situation in Oakland and how it dissolved or broke down, or the timing of it, or the back and forth of it, or the history of it. Like, there is some drama like lingering in Oakland, and it's interesting how lawmakers now in Nevada have even asked the question, what happened in Oakland? Why is that leading this to us? And it's a fair question. I mean, look, it's been a while since I've been in this realm, but typically if you start seeing somebody, you eventually have a few questions about, well, who else have you engaged with over time, right? Like, it's a question. It's an obvious question. What's the history of this individual? And in this case, Nevada lawmakers are asking kind of that question. And I don't think what they're uncovering is potentially helpful to them to figuring out an ultimatum here. And I would also say, like, record on the field, forget, the track and where it's been. Like, the record on the field right now of a 130 loss team and a roster that does not have a Matt Chapman, a Matt Olson, a Marcus Semien, a Sean Murphy. I could go on and on. All the names in a manager like Bob Melvin. This is no disrespect to the current group of players and the up-and-coming nature. The Oakland A's and what general manager David Force does, like, they will regenerate. That baseball operations side of the Oakland A's, separate from all this stuff going on, they have always been so good at procuring talent. But I'm just saying the last group, they've been so good that the last group they brought in, you don't have that as an advertisement anymore. Imagine how different this would be right now if there was a pitch to lawmakers that, you know what, we've got a 97-win team here. We've won the division a couple times lately. We contend every year. We've got this group. And even if this group isn't entirely who will be on the team in 2028, this is our core. We're going to build and add some pieces to this. We're going to maintain this core. Kind of like a garden, right? Some of the Plants and flowers, they might die over time, but you prune them, you put a new one, you plant a new one, it grows, but you keep the garden looking nice. At this point, like, the garden is pretty barren. And so this is not necessarily an appealing thing. And look, this is, if you're watching this, you're probably a sports person and you realize teams, like I said before, they get really good, then they struggle, then they get really good. It ebbs and flows. But right now, you're in such a situation where this team is so bad that the casual person, and sometimes the casual sports person, might be a lawmaker. And they're like, wait, what? This team will never be good, which is not necessarily true. But right now, that's going against the idea of what you're trying to present as entertainment in Las Vegas. And that's kind of the last thing here. I mean, think about entertainment in Las Vegas. I'm going to say Tiesto again. What if Tiesto put on a bad show? Would you still go see Tiesto? What if the Blue Man Group wasn't that, well, I guess I might like it. I don't think I've ever seen it in person. But what if their new act for this season was really bad? And people heard about it and were like, whoa, that is historically one of the worst Blue Man Group acts I've ever seen. Probably doesn't sell tickets like it used to. But these are things that A's baseball would have to contend with and compete against in Southern Nevada. Like, you have to be down there, a concert or a show or a performance that people like want to see. Imagine, I was thinking this the other day, Shohei Ohtani, scheduled to be a free agent this winter. What if the A's went down there and said, you know what, we are competing so much to have a good team that we'll be in the race we might bring Shohei Ohtani to the Las Vegas Strip. We're going to have baseball's unicorn, the guy who pitches and hits home runs. We haven't seen a player like this yet since Babe Ruth. We're bringing the next Babe Ruth to the Las Vegas Strip. Oh, you got my attention now. But this isn't even a team that's coming with the Mats, Ole and Chappie and Marcus and Liam. And I feel guilty too. I want to mention Chris Bassett, Frankie Montas, Laser Ramon. I mean, there's so many critical players of that last little group there. Anyway, and if I forgot a few, I'm sorry about that. But this is like the current team and the situation cannot be helping the optics of what's being presented and assessed here. Oh, I have one more. Thought that was the last one. Separate from all of this, by the way, and I also have a video on this. Maybe it's out, or actually, I think I might put it out next anyway. But I just made a video on this as well, too. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, a couple days ago, while all the Nevada stuff was going on, she wrote a letter to MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred. She, of course, represents the 12th Congressional District, which is Oakland and northern parts of Alameda County. She wrote a letter to Commissioner Manfred suggesting that relocation is, quote, inconsistent with federal policy goals related to the MLB's exemption from antitrust scrutiny. That's right, 100 plus years of antitrust exemption that baseball has had. She's saying, hang on a second, this might go against that. And once that gets brought up, now this is separate. Like, this video right now is all about the pause and where we're at now, but this is like next level stuff, because after all Nevada if it does get squared away, if it gets approved and financed, that just means that Nevada's saying, yes, you can do this. Yes, we'll help pay for it with the state and the county. This is aimed at the ultimate final step, which is MLB approving relocation and doing so without a relocation fee. I urge you to check out this video when you can, and it goes into detail of what she said. And also, I don't have a video on MLB's antitrust exemption. You know what? I need to interview somebody who is an expert on law for that. It's so detailed, so hard to understand, but it does dive into two main aspects: antitrust exemption, player contracts and the way that they're employed, how baseball as a business can kind of not have competition like another league or other teams, and also relocation and expansion are part of that. Way too deep in the weeds for here and now, but just know that beyond all of the Nevada stuff, this is starting to simmer up to the surface too. So it's getting quite interesting. Okay, end of the presentation. And look, I've just got to say, the last couple days, which were supposed to be off days for yours truly, were not off days, or very draining emotionally, from a sense of just sitting there waiting for the Senate to be in session. I mean, it's eating at all of us right now. So what I want to say is take this weekend, hang in there, right? There's a lot going on here. It's difficult to process and understand. Hopefully this video helped you make some sense of it. But let's all take this break and know that, yeah, starting on Monday and starting next week, once again, there could be a lot to pay attention to. Thumbs up on this video since you made it here all the way to the end. You know I always appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so I can definitely see you next time.